Okay, hello. My name is Colin. Welcome to episode 15 of Roll by Roll's Tavern Talk, a show where we, the Roll by Roll gang, discuss various aspects of running a great D&D campaign based on our experiences with D&D 5e and our current adventures in Emathan homebrew campaign. So joining me tonight are the rest of the Roll by Roll crew. So we'll start off with Barry. Barry, introduce yourself and your characters in the game.
Well, as was stated, my name's Barry. I play Nightingale and Landis in the Adventures of Emathan.
Excellent. Egan?
Hello, Egan, and I play Douglas McCain as well as Lafferty Jones.
Excellent. And Max?
That's me, and I play one character. He's Kogon, the Dragonborn fighter.
He's the size of two, though.
Yeah,
That's true.
He's worth the two of us.
No.
All right, welcome, guys. So, no surprise to anyone who follows us, we play our D&D 5e homebrew campaign called Adventures in Emathan on the Fantasy Grounds Virtual Tabletop, or VTT. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that we're big fans of Fantasy Grounds.
Woo!
The shirt. The subtle drop.
The subtle. So in this episode, we're going to talk about playing D&D on a virtual tabletop, specifically around Fantasy Grounds, because I think we established we are all most familiar with that, and is undoubtedly one of our favorites, if not the favorite. So we're going to start off. Barry definitely was the one that got us talking about this one, the big elephant in the room right off the bat. Do you prefer playing D&D in person or online, and why? So, Barry, since you kind of posed this question to the group, what are your thoughts there?
It's an easy one for me. I prefer around a table. I'm the kind of person that I feed off the energy of the people in a room. So when people are within my proximity, I get swept up in the story a lot easier. The whole crowd can feed off that emotion when someone's, rolling hot on the dice and kicking butt. You can just see and feel that change in the table. And, there's certain sounds you can't get. Like you'll never hear a can of pop open on a VTT or that finger digging in the bottom of the chip bowl, right? Like it's when you have it at home around a table with a group of friends in your basement or wherever you play, it's an entire experience. It's the before, the after, and you just kind of lose some of that in the virtual tabletop. Not saying that they're bad, but I personally would prefer to have dice rolling on my table.
Cool. Max, why don't you go next?
Yeah, I prefer in person as well. In addition to the sort of ambiance that gets created, like Barry mentioned, I find it's more responsive and snappier play in general. Just as people responding to each other with talking, and then even just deciding actions and all and adjudicating all that stuff from the DM side just seems quicker without the bit of delay and I guess sort of a respectful politeness that's kind of required when you're online to ensure that you're not kind of going over top of each other. So yeah, I definitely enjoy person more, but I'd rather play D&D than nothing at all. So of course, we make whatever we need to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Egan?
Well, if you had asked me years ago, I would say in person by a country mile, but I'm gonna take the stance that I've come to know and love the virtual side of things, and as Max alluded to, I wouldn't be playing if it weren't for a virtual tabletop. I'm the lone wolf here out west versus my friends from the Great White North. And even though there are game shops close to me, it's strangers. And you guys have become my virtual friends and friends, I'd like to think. So I'm going to lean right now towards the virtual side of things because, again, it is allowing me to play again after a hiatus. Now, I did try an in person not too long ago, and it was okay. But again, because it was with strangers and it was nothing like the good old days in mom's basement, or I had a garage that we converted, and sitting around that table and hearing those dice roll and all that stuff. So um, if it ever comes about where everybody lives close, I'll be right back wanting to do live and in person, but virtual for me by a little bit.
Yeah. For myself, I'm fully in the virtual category. I love technology, and playing D&D online really allows me to kind of geek out on my setup and what I can deliver as a DM with that setup. But to sort of talk to what you were talking about, Egan, a little bit, to to find a D&D group that has really really good chemistry that translates into a really awesome night of D&D requires a group of people that like to play D&D a certain way. And when you're in your local town trying to find four, five, six people that want to play D&D the way you want to play D&D, that's almost an impossible mission. If you that's a holy grail if you can find four or five people that want to come together in the same room and play D&D the same way. Whereas we literally can play D&D virtually with anybody in the world. We're playing D&D. We're four people who live in two different countries, four different cities. And we have chemistry as a group in the way that we play that just makes for awesome games every night. And that's really hard to achieve in person because it's just hard to find those people that are like you. And that's one of the things that really puts me in the virtual, the online category when playing. So, second question or discussion point here: what are some of the things that you like about playing D&D on the Fantasy Grounds virtual tabletop? So, and I mean, even if you want to touch on your personal story around Fantasy Grounds, maybe any experience you have with other VTTs. Barry?
Some of the things I really enjoy about Fantasy Grounds is the way it handles a lot of the mechanics for you. So as D&D, especially 5e, what we've played, as more and more books are released and there's more and more subclasses and spells and abilities and feats, Fantasy Grounds has done a phenomenal job with keeping pace with all of that due to its large support network that it has, and the way it handles mechanics allows you to stay more immersed in the game, I feel, so that you're not having to juggle, the dice math as often as you would on a tabletop. I really enjoy the fact that the dungeon master, as usual, is the one who has to buy all the books and then can share them with his table. So if as a cost savings thing, that makes it more accessible to people who might not have a lot of money. As long as your DM can buy the core books, you've got access to them. And the way Fantasy Ground operates with its memberships, you can play the game with a free membership. Fine. And I think most of us started off with free memberships, but each of us got the dungeon master bug in us, so we had to get a version so that we can run a game here and there. So those are some of the pros about it. Do you want me to go into any of the cons, I feel, or
We'll get back to those. We'll get back
okay,
to
we'll
those.
stick with
Yep.
we'll make
Yeah.
a love hate love sandwich.
Yeah. Exactly. Max, things you
uh,
like about playing D&D with Fantasy Grounds? I'd be as the newest guy to our little group. How'd you get introduced to Fantasy Grounds?
Um, so I actually did try Fantasy Grounds once back with my old group when we were making concessions for COVID stuff. And so we played Roll 20. We played Fantasy Grounds once because we were rotating DMs, so we were just trying different things out. And but it was we're talking about literally like white pages with black borders. Like it was basically like pen and paper rooms. Do you know what I mean? And like the most basic, it wasn't like what you're throwing out on the table. I played a little bit with Owlbear Rodeo, which is a browser-based mapping tool. You can import whatever map, and that one's really interesting because it's super basic.
Yeah.
So it basically is like if you're just like, I just want to be pen and paper, but have a visual for people to do maps on, then that's probably the simplest route to go. But yeah, no, I would say I don't have a lot of depth and knowledge. Like playing with you guys really brought out the real capabilities of what VTTs can do, and so with Fantasy Ground Unity, it's really impressive. What I think I like the most about it is how you as the player slash DM can go in and customize code and things like that. Um, I'm not sure about the other ones, but just based on what we've done, it allows you to tailor things specifically to your game, create your homebrew stuff really simply, things like that. Once you kind of know the basics of the back end, then it's not that bad. It's fairly straightforward, I think. So, I think just that accessibility is probably the biggest thing for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Egan?
Well, I know it's about pros, but also talk a little bit about my history. And again, it was also during COVID. I've just used Fantasy Grounds. So, Fantasy Grounds is the best. It's number one. We love you, Fantasy Grounds. Um, um, Basically, if a guy like me, completely computer illiterate, other than, your basic Windows, can pick it up with very little research needed. And by the way, there are hundreds of YouTube
Oh
tutorials
yeah.
that are fantastic. So it's not just, the fact that it's easy to really just be a player. You have a lot of resources to get you up to speed. Listen, I'll echo the customization. We do a lot of homebrew stuff in our game. We've created homebrew classes. Colin's been able to literally create that as as a subclass. Simplify the fact that we don't have to do math is a big positive. But a couple new things, or I would like to introduce, is like the versatility. We had some issues last session where we couldn't see the enemy in the combat tracker. No problem. Roll the dice over the token, still achieve the attack. So it didn't clog up the game, even though there were issues. So there's a few different ways to I guess make the omelet, if you will. And then one thing I really love about it is fog of war. Like there are like sight lines, like you could literally darken the map, and your guy, if they don't have a light source, don't see anything,
Yeah.
or they can just see like behind a column, and it really creates a lot of interesting scenarios in combat and some excitement and some mystery and stuff like that. So I like those things.
Even in the short time we've played with Fantasy Grounds, their mapping system has constantly been evolving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's an awesome part of this thing is they keep pushing the boundaries and improving their product. It's
Yeah, I mean with the line of sight stuff, with the dynamic lighting, with being able to add effects like, shimmering water and rivers and
yeah.
it's neat. You can kind of bring your maps to life. So
I
for
would
me,
also like to mention, sorry, Colin,
nope.
just last thing I'd like to mention. I did, play in person. I probably did like 4 or 5 sessions. And guys, I know it's been a while since we've all played in person, maybe. I don't know. But you think your damage rolls and your pluses and your minuses? Try doing it without Fantasy Grounds.
Oh,
I was frozen sometimes, and I was playing a barbarian who has just I rolled the dice. I'm like, oh my god, how much? So making fun of those folks in Critical Role that couldn't add up their damage. Trust me, guys, play in person. It was crazy.
Yeah, I'm going to play right off that. One of the things that I really like about Fantasy Grounds. So I actually I'm going to start with. So Barry actually turned me on to Fantasy Grounds. We had been trying to play D&D together for 30 am I 30 plus ish
Ever
years.
since you moved away after you
Yeah,
graduated.
basically, we had talked about, we got to be able to get together sometime and play D&D. And then we were talking one day, and he's like, "Oh, I played on this Fantasy Grounds, and it lets people play D&D." And I was like, "Hey, what now?" And I started digging into it, and I mean, within I think 2 weeks, we played our first campaign together, the two of us, and it was just awesome. Um,
Love
I
at first
did,
sight.
yeah, I did a bunch of research. I looked at Roll20, Foundry. Like, there's so many, and there are tons of fantastic um, VTTs out there. But you know, because Fantasy Grounds was the first one I ever used, I naturally compared everything to it all the time, right? And to me, I mean, it had to be better in some way for me to say, we should move to Roll20, or we should move to Foundry, or we should move to whatever. The one thing I really like over all of the VTTs is the game mechanic integration that Fantasy Grounds has compared to, and kind of getting to what you talked about there, Egan, where a lot of the crunchy stuff about D&D, I'm not a big fan of. And having the virtual tabletop work us through all of that math all the time, I love that. It's like, oh yeah, it remembered that modifier or that modifier, or this guy gets advantage or that guy gets disadvantage. And it's not perfect, but I tell you what, it's a lot easier for me as the DM to be remembering about other things than whether or not we got those game mechanics, the math right. So that's one of the things for me I really like about, in terms of a VTT altogether, being able to organize my session notes, where there's links to the maps and links to the tokens and the NPCs and to the magic items, and it's all there, and I just got to click stuff on the screen, and it's right there in front of me. That, to me, that makes the game move way faster than if we were in person and I'm flipping through books and trying to find my notes and stuff like that. I'm just clicking things on my stories and on my images and pins I've dropped on the maps, and it's all so much faster for me. Like when you guys are like, "Oh, well, what was his name?" And I'm just like, click, it was so and so. And yeah, yeah.
I would just like to
You the
counterpoint.
guy in the bottom left or bottom
Yeah.
right?
Is that where I am?
Yeah.
Okay. You could totally integrate all that stuff at the table.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's another beautiful thing. You're not limited to online play with
Nope.
any of this stuff. You
Nope.
can play with a virtual tabletop in person.
Yeah,
And
and that's a great point, Max, because I've
you can do it
seen
all.
people
Yeah.
do some amazing integrations of
Yeah.
VTTs where they got a table or a TV in the middle of the table. All that is there. That's a great point because it
You could just
does.
do a U shape around a big TV screen if you really wanted to. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like,
Yep.
none of that. It doesn't really matter. You know what I mean?
No,
Yeah, the
no,
Anyway,
that's
modern
that's a
DM
good
screen
point. It,
now
it
is
does
a
give
laptop.
you it does give you that ability to be able to just take that into an in person,
yeah.
and absolutely still have access to all of that. All right. Discussion point number 3. So, what are some of the things you don't like about playing D&D on Fantasy Grounds, or maybe just virtual tabletops in general? Barry?
I will start off with real estate on the screen. Man, you run out of it so quickly when you got your character sheets open and the DM drops a big map and now the map's covering where you're dropping the dice. And so that's one of the things that I think with a bit of learning, you can manage better with hotkeys and all that kind of stuff. What Fantasy Grounds gives you the options. I just haven't figured that out yet. But right off the top of my head was the limited screen space, the time it takes to learn the system.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a lot of time to play on a table. If you know the game, you can do this. Now you're playing D&D, right? So there's a bit of a learning curve. like Egan said, it's a little intimidating when you first get on. A lot of it is very intuitive, but when you actually start to play the fine minutia of it, you really gotta, dedicate a bit of time to learning it. And you'll need a second party video provider. Like we use Zoom so that we can see each other. And I know a lot of people just play with audio, and we did that for the beginning part of our venture back into it. We just use Discord, which is every gamer's,
Go
audio
to.
sets, yeah, go to for audio. But the game changed so much when we got video
Yeah.
that, it
Well, it's
was,
more like sitting around a table with a bunch of people then, right? Because you can actually, like
yeah,
you were talking about earlier, feeding off of that what they're doing and stuff, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's just a few of the cons. It's a great system. They're always improving it, but it's not perfect yet.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about wish list at the end of this, but Fantasy Grounds needs pages. Like if you could have a page set up a certain way and then click a button and it's another whole page that you could set up. So like this is my combat setup, this is my,
Yeah.
it I'm sure they're listening, so we'll let
Like a
them know all
macro.
of the things, yeah.
I tried to plug them as much as I could.
Yeah. All right, Max.
Yeah, I don't have much to say here actually. I think same thing. It's just a learning curve thing, and that's just going to be what it is with any of the digital stuff. Um, Other than that, I don't think there's really not too many negatives. I think I guess from a philosophical standpoint, you could become too reliant maybe, or too, it's always about expectations again, you know what I mean? And I really think the true heart of D&D is your imagination. So um if you can't still play, like I said, with those like white pages with black lines around it and still feel to find that fulfilling, you know what I mean? Then I think there's just a risk there of getting too caught up in sometimes what these things are capable of. Because you never know when your awesome group might fall apart and you're forced to go with a low tech
With the
version. You know what
neighborhood
I mean?
kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta comb the high schools. Come on.
So, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. That's really sort of like touchy feely into like philosophy of gaming more than anything. But as far as like yeah, what they bring to the table, yeah, just one more time, just a learning curve is the only major hurdle that I think is can be a negative when you're trying to get new people,
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
involved, right? So
Yeah. Egan?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's a couple things. Let's face it, we do all the right things. Colin does all the right things, but last session we had a glitch, a pretty major one. We could not see any of the NPCs, the monsters on our combat tracker, and they were on the map. The token was there, and thankfully we had the backup with the dropping the dice onto the token. But it was we couldn't see who was next. Colin had to sort of manually say, "Hey, you're up," or "You're up," or "You're up." Um, and I don't know if this is a bad thing, to be honest with you, but we couldn't see if they were wounded, if it was heavy, which maybe if you look at it from a fighting standpoint, you could see a creature that's really
yeah,
pretty worse for wear. So I guess that would translate into having it written in the combat tracker. So in other words, it makes sense. So glitches still happen, right? Why am I not able to target? It happens quite a bit. Even though we think we're doing it all the same way, but sometimes that happens. And then sort of an old computer saying, crap in, crap out. If you don't make an effect properly,
yeah,
it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we don't have someone like Colin correcting our math, I know I've struggled. I've tried to make certain things and it just didn't quite work. But I think that goes to the learning curve that we were just referencing.
yeah.
But it's there, it's close to perfect, but there are still some issues that come up from time to time.
That's a really good point, Egan. The fact that because we all live so far apart, we're very reliant on Fantasy Grounds operating perfectly. and Zoom operating. One of us lose internet connection and that's it. You can't play today,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
That's the
Yep.
one. Yeah.
Like anytime you're heavily reliant on
Knock on wood,
technology,
that hasn't happened yet.
I know.
yeah, you put
That
yourself
being,
at that risk.
Yeah.
And Colin's got everything at his disposal. If it came worse to worse, we could still play without Fantasy Grounds. Like if
Yeah,
that was not functioning properly or something, we all have dice. We've
Yep.
all
Yeah.
got
yep.
our character sheets in
Yep.
some form, at least enough that maybe our super tactical combat wouldn't happen if you don't have your character sheet memorized per se, right? But the
Yeah,
gist of your stuff. You know what I mean? Like you can still make it
you could
work.
still make it work. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good thing about
We're
online.
gonna have a retro session, guys. We're gonna have a retro session. Colin, physical DM's guide, and us just rolling manual dice. We'll have to play the honor system. Come on.
Now, Colin, you must have a completely different kind of list of cons coming from the DM side of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, so first of all, I gotta own the combat tracker thing from last session. I missed an extension update, and that's what
Oh.
that was all about. So I
Oh,
gotta own
It's
that
still a
one over
glitch.
here.
It's still
Do
a
you think
It
glitch.
you
is.
think that was affecting like my fire resistance and stuff like that?
I'm not sure
We have
what.
to we have to do some troubleshooting, don't
Yeah,
we?
because that extension does affect a lot of things that goes on
Yeah.
within the combat tracker. So yeah, that one's totally on me. That's not on Fantasy Grounds. I went in after on Sunday and I'm like, oh damn, because usually when Fantasy Grounds updates, all the extension makers they do their updates if it changes anything, and I missed. I didn't go in and check for the extension updates. So there could have been there were a couple of other extensions that could have been affecting that, but
Interesting.
so yeah, all me. But so things I don't like about playing D&D on Fantasy Grounds, I don't have a lot. I actually really like the way my game prep style, my DMing style really lends itself to the way Fantasy Grounds goes together. Like I talked about where you can put your maps on there and you can throw pins that take you to the parts of your story when they get there, and you know it just I do everything in OneNote ahead of time, transfer it all into Fantasy Grounds, and I it's fantastic because everything that we've done is in there, so I can easily like say something like the Stargazer. Anytime I think the Stargazer is coming up, I just throw in a link to an entire story I have of all the stuff to do with the Stargazer. So I just got to click one button. There's all the crew, the ship, pictures, everything is there. So the one thing that I would talk about that I don't like is we've already talked about the learning curve is steep for Fantasy Grounds. It's probably by a long shot steeper for Fantasy Grounds because of the automation within the game mechanics, right? You got to learn how that all works in order to, even we who have been working with it for quite some time, we still struggle a little bit from time to time putting effects together and things like that, right? We talked about there's lots of good YouTube videos and things like that. There's a few guys that do some good videos, but I think there's room in there for like if you ever go into their wiki, sort of their manual, there's not a lot in there. I guess what I'm trying to get to is there's not as much there to help out someone brand new in a very start from the basics and move through learning and walking up that mountain, that fantasy. It's
yeah.
all out
Syllabus.
there. It's all out there, but it's all over the place. And if you're a new person, you don't know about the best YouTube sites and the best websites and the best places to go. there's some opportunity there to help people that want to get into playing D&D with Fantasy Grounds, give them a better path to learn that all. Let me write that down. There's my new business idea as I'm kind of spitting that out.
Also, just another plug for Fantasy Grounds or other RPGs.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not just a D&D RPG format. So
Yeah.
just to
Very
make
good.
sure we're
Very good
clear on
point.
that.
No,
to
they
give
have
Fantasy
actually
Grounds
they
their
have
credit.
just a fantastic catalog of
library,
game systems that again, so much of the game mechanics are automated, which again, for me, I'm not a crunchy guy. Like I never really enjoyed all of the math and everything. I like that Fantasy Grounds
handles it.
yeah. How about you do that, and I'll help with these guys. We'll tell a story, and you just do the math over there, okay? Fantasy Grounds. Yeah. Okay. We're getting to the point here. We're 30 minutes. Let's finish off before we all kind of have our final thoughts on the topic tonight. But what is the number one thing on your Fantasy Grounds wish list? What do you wish Fantasy Grounds could do? And then I'll just clip out this section. I'll send it to Fantasy Grounds. Say, just let us know the development path going forward. Barry, what is on your Fantasy Grounds wish list?
I think they need to either include or make their own video setup. Like, I think that's a really missed opportunity for them. It's probably relatively simple to set up, but for the fact that you buy your software, you go online and then you can't see anybody. And it's set up that you can actually run the game solely through text. But I don't know about the rest of you. It really slowed down when it got to me and my two finger typing, trying to tell you what I was about to do. So I think, them adding some type of video and audio setup support would be a really advantageous step for them to take and would really separate them from the current market. Because I think a lot of them are just the VTT systems and they don't encompass the whole package, and you definitely need to hear and see people to have that ultimate gaming experience.
Yeah, I that's actually the only one I know that has that in it is Roll20, right? Like I don't think anyone else has that integrated, but interesting. Max?
All right, I'm going to sound a little bit like an a-hole because I just talked about being careful of immersion and imagination and things like that, right? But I would love, instead of tokens, digital figurines.
Yeah.
Oh, you
know what I
stole
mean?
my thunder, man.
So,
Yeah.
for your characters and for monsters. So I'm sure there's third-party people who've made some packs and stuff like that. But just if you could have a comprehensive catalog, so you can be like, all right, I want this green dragon.
So you know what? That is 100% already available.
Okay.
Yeah. They are packages.
Hey, what's going on, bro?
They are packages you have to purchase to get the figurines versus using tokens. Might be something that we as a group need to explore a little bit. It's just investing in some token packs, but yeah, there are artists out there that make some fantastic figurine packages.
Fantasy Grounds should connect with Dwarven Forge, so you could design your character and it would import into Fantasy Grounds. That would be awesome.
There you go.
There's a partnership for you guys.
I think actually there is now stuff. I don't know if they require a partnership, but if it's just the way they read code and how it's coded. But like I think on some of those 3D builders, you can now have a 3D like digital figurine option that actually imports.
Yeah.
Egan, do you got any thunder left?
I got a lot.
Okay.
Yes, it's a big one, and I've talked about this before. I'll tease. First, I would love now one thing that won D&D and it had a lot of kind of BS going on, but one of the coolest parts of their potential was an actual, like you're looking at miniatures on a table. And if there's a way for Fantasy Grounds to convert that, in other words, like pretend like instead of looking at a flat 2D screen, like I'm looking down onto a game board with miniatures that I can move around, that would be awesome. But my number one thing would be somehow creating physical digital dice that I can roll here in my
Oh,
on my desk, and the result goes onto the
Oh
chat.
yeah, I
How
agree.
freaking awesome would that be?
So
All right, I got
I have
15.
actually looked into that a little bit. There are some companies that are already all over that.
Oh man,
I believe Roll20 has some digital dice or no, maybe it's Foundry has some
hmm
digital dice integration where you actually roll it and your result comes up on screen. I can't remember which one of those, but there's some people on that already, and I agree that
oh
that brings back a little bit of the tactile part of
yes,
D
the
and D
I
feel
that's
of
don't
the
there.
have
dice.
hundreds of dice not to
for
use
nothing.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't color
exactly.
code my spells for nothing. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
that
would
would be
agree, Egan.
awesome.
That would be a fantastic one if you could,
Oh,
a little dice tray USB into your computer, and now
yep.
you're in business, right?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
good one. Very good one. For myself, I got two little wish list things. Um, the first is so Fantasy Grounds now has their character builder wizard, which I think is fantastic. For especially for somebody that's new to D&D, because it can really help prompt you through building your character. I wish they looked at a few more wizards, like for instance, a wizard to help you build effects. Like
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah,
it
yeah.
would help you
Yes.
put those together a little bit. Maybe a if you want to, and I know there's an extension that does this, an NPC builder, but built into the game, something to whip up a real quick NPC. Just check some boxes and it fires up most of what you need out of building an NPC. And that there's an extension that does something similar to that. I haven't had a chance to explore, but just a few more wizards to help out with some of the things in the game that are not completely intuitive right out of the gate. And
hmm
obviously they can do it because the character wizard is fantastic. Um, and we talked about this a little bit pre-show. Um, I love some of the animated map stuff that is out there right now. It would be fantastic if you could import and use some of these animated maps. They're just they are so nice. And, excuse me, Fantasy Grounds. They're already looking at there's already things available, and I know they're working on other animations you can add to static maps. But it still would be nice if you could just start with, there's some artists out there that are just making some fantastic animated maps, and just adds that little bit of pizzazz to, if you've got that temple scene where all the braziers are you can see the fire in them and the fire pit is burning and smoke is going around. It just adds a little bit to the ambiance of where your tokens are. Should not be tokens. We'll definitely have to look at that. I do like that idea. um yeah, so let's wrap this one up, guys. Barry, your final thoughts on our topic tonight about playing D&D on a virtual laptop, or a virtual tabletop.
It's going to be a little bit of a shout out to a creator out there, Rob Toohey, and all of the stuff he does for Fantasy Grounds. If you're getting into Fantasy Grounds, you have to find Rob Toohey's extensions, because once we discovered it, it helps so much in the game. Instead of you spending hours and hours and hours trying to figure out how to code this stuff, this guy has thought of everything. He's got feats coded for you, racial abilities coded. It's phenomenal stuff, and hats off to the guy, because I think we've all contributed to him buying a Porsche. So
I was going to say, I have Rob Toohey has a lot of my money.
yeah,
I sent one of his kids to college for
yeah.
sure.
But yeah, it's just really cool that Fantasy Grounds is confident enough to allow outside creators to piggyback, and it's just improved their system,
Yep.
Absolutely.
unlike some other people out there.
Max, final thoughts?
Thoughts? Yeah, I think it's a wonderful system, and it's fun to you just be able to just drop die on that enemy and watch him get roasted. Hopefully, it's a good experience overall. I think what VTTs add to the game, whether in person or online, outweighs what might be diminished in some way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's it. It's great.
Egan?
What I think that virtual tabletops also allow is for introverts, shy people that are nervous about getting involved in a game. Yes, we play on Zoom, but a lot play on voice only, and it takes away some of that fear. It takes away some of that inhibition to join a new group and meet new people, even if it's just by voice. And that way, again, you're able to still play and fully immerse yourself. Because believe it or not everybody is outgoing and comfortable meeting strangers. So I think it also gives you that option as well, via the virtual tabletop to join this wonderful game.
Yeah.
You started off with us voice only,
Yeah, we
Voice
were
only.
voice. We
and
were
I
Yeah.
tell you,
voice.
it was shocking when we saw you.
Yeah, you still kept me, which is amazing. I appreciate your
I was just like,
hospitality on
ah,
that.
damn, another old white guy.
Jeez,
We don't
God.
got enough of those in this group.
Oh my. So I've said it tonight already, but I'm going to say it again. I absolutely love playing D&D on a virtual tabletop. Being able to play with you for folks, we love the same kind of game, and without a virtual tabletop, there would be no way the four of us could play this game. This game that we all absolutely love to play, and you got to 100% give that to the virtual tabletop.
Yeah.
Whether it's Fantasy Grounds, anything. I love Fantasy Grounds. It's the one I started on, but I was actually on a mission for a while to say, is there something better? And I went out and tried. I can't even think of the name of all of them that I tried, and they're great, but they weren't better. And at the end of the day, I was just like, if they're not better, there's really no reason for me to move to another tabletop. None of them did. I've mentioned it already. None of them took away the part of this game I love that is not my gig, which is the math, the crunchiness of keeping track of all the numbers and making sure all the modifiers and everything are there, and Fantasy Grounds just takes care of that for me, so I can just stay immersed in the story that we're all telling, and I really love that about Fantasy Grounds. Before I wrap up here, I just want to give a shout out to Here with Light, our newest super fan who has joined us again tonight. Thank you so much for hanging out and
What a
been in
beast.
the chat there commenting on some of our stuff. We're really going to have to think about someone monitoring that better than I can. I did get to say welcome, though, so we really thank you very much for coming out. You're here for Tavern Talks. You're here for Adventures in Emathan. We love that. Thank you very much. So, guys, that's a wrap for episode 15 of Roll by Roll's Tavern Talk. We hope that everyone's enjoyed tonight's topic. Tavern Talks occur the Tuesday after each of our Saturday night Adventures in Emathan sessions, with the recordings posted on Thursdays, I think, is when I get that edit done. Our next session is scheduled for March 4th. Hopefully everybody remembers that. For those of you watching on YouTube, please support us. Make sure you like our videos and subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell icon so that you'll be alerted when the next session occurs. So the end of the episode, guys, we will offer a cheers. Thanks for joining us in the tavern, and we hope you can join us next time. Cheers, guys.
And
Cheers.
just so everyone knows, we're not sponsored by Fantasy Grounds.
Yet.
Yet. We're working on it. All right, guys. Thanks very much. Have a good night.
All right. Good night.